All right, welcome back to Let It Rip. Michigan's cannabis industry, I tell you what, it is booming. Sales going into the millions of dollars. But I tell you what, there's some controversy regarding whether caregivers are cutting into the business of dispensaries, provisioning centers, as they like to be called. And then what about that black market? Joining me right now, Jerry Millen. He is from the Greenhouse of Walled Lake, and cannabis attorney Barton Morris. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. There we go. There they are. Jerry, let me start with you, first of all. As a person who sells marijuana, do caregivers, people like Granny that we showed earlier, do they threaten your business because they can grow it and sell it cheaper than you can sell it?
Charlie, absolutely not. The caregiver system, which I used to be a part of, I used to be a caregiver. That's how I got into cannabis. So we opened the greenhouse. It was a process. But let me state equivocally or unequivocally that caregivers do not hurt the legal system, period. It hurts corporate weed, or corporate greed, as I like to call it. What really hurts the system, there's two different things here, caregivers and the black market. Caregivers, you should absolutely be able to grow your own cannabis or help patients, which I did. The black market, you have people hiding behind the word caregiver. I know people that are putting up million-dollar buildings, growing illegal cannabis, and making millions of dollars every year. They're not caregivers. They say they are, but they're not. Caregivers, absolutely.
So, Jerry, but can't those caregivers, though, but can't they provide the same or better medicine that you can provide at a lower price?
You know, the prices on licensed, state-tested, regulated cannabis has come down drastically over the past year. And honestly, right now, caregiver flower, even black market flower, is a little more expensive than the dispensaries are charging. So the quality is there. The biggest thing between the caregiver system and the legal license system is that we have to test everything. So if you come into a dispensary, everything is tested, everything is dosed. It's more for the masses. And we also take care of patients. I started Patients Over Profits years ago. I was here in the beginning for patients. I'll always be here for patients. And I'm for anybody that has the sympathy to help out sick people, cancer patients, little kids. So I encourage people, if you want to be a caregiver, be one. It's not easy to grow this plant. Some people don't want to go to the local person to buy. They want to make sure their product's tested.
All right, let me bring in Barton Morris. Your client, Granny, we'll call her, she knows how to grow. There's no doubt about that. Wow. But do you feel, though, that some laws are really, especially the zoning area, as we have seen in Ypsilanti Township, are kind of squeezing out those caregivers, not allowing them to grow? And again, just so we understand, a caregiver, as I understand it, is you're growing for medical use, not recreational. I think I'm right on that one. Is that right, Barton?
We have in Michigan, since 2008, we've had medical marijuana, and the primary means for patients to get that marijuana, especially in the beginning, was caregivers. Caregivers were identified as those that could grow on behalf of patients. And yes, what has been happening over the years is, as Jerry had mentioned, some people identify themselves as caregivers, but perhaps not growing on behalf of their patients. Instead, they're growing on behalf of an unlicensed, unregulated market. They get exploited. They're growing in numbers. And then municipalities then are starting to crack down on them because there's some people that are renting out homes simply to grow as much marijuana as they can, and feeding into the unregulated market. This was also supported by the Marijuana Regulatory Agency because when they began to provide licenses, as Jerry understands, there was a shortage of marijuana, and so they looked for marijuana from caregivers, and so they kind of incentivize caregivers to grow as much as they can so they can introduce it into that regulated market. And so what then happened is now there's just been a lot of unregulated, unlicensed marijuana, and to some degree, yes, it competes with licensed industry, but that's our system in Michigan, and that's what we have to deal with.
So help me out here, Barton. Am I understanding correctly? I thought I read a statistic that 70% of people who buy, let's go back to recreational marijuana, they're not buying it from the dispensaries. They're buying it on the black market. Or, as you say, maybe these caregivers that are not really caregivers for medical people. They're just growing it and selling it. Is that statistic accurate, Barton?
Well, actually, I think what the statistics said was there's 70% of the transactions occurred outside of the licensed regulated market. And that was 2020. We see that the numbers, the sales for regulated sales continue to increase. Just in June of 2021, it was $107 million. So the state of Michigan is on track to have about a $3.5 billion sales in both medical and recreational marijuana. I'd say that over time, that's going to continue to increase, and the number of transactions outside of the regulated market will decrease.
So Jerry is smiling there. He's $3 billion now, $4 billion next year. Jerry, you're standing clean up. But I mean, is your competition the black market?
Our competition, I don't believe, is the black market per se, because people that come to the greenhouse of Walled Lake want a state-tested, dosed properly, and they want to ask questions. We have safe products.
Yeah, but they've got to pay more for it, though. They can go to Granny, but they have to pay more for your stuff. They go to Granny, and maybe not Granny that we're talking about, some other Granny.
No.
And get it cheaper. No, Charlie,
the black market is the prices are on par now. It is not cheaper in the black market. And here you're getting it tested. The prices in cannabis has come down drastically. The problem you have, Charlie, you can tell right now, it's only me and Barton on the show. Where is the MCMA, the Marijuana Cannabis Manufacturers Association? They're the ones that want to change the caregiver laws. They're not here because they need to just be quiet, because they're swatting a hornet's nest. You have companies like Loom, which is owned by Bell Tire. A lot of people don't know that. Green Peak, they own the Skyman dispensaries. That is corporate weed. They don't want anybody competing with them. They don't want the greenhouse competing with them. They don't want the mom and pop dispensaries.
But what's the difference?
They don't want Calvin Johnson in the game.
I know, but I mean, when McDonald's came to be, they took away a lot of the mom and pop hamburger places.
Right.
And what's wrong with corporate weed if the product is good and the people can get it for a cheaper price?
Well, the problem is they're riding our coattails. I was a caregiver. There's thousands of caregivers out there, people that have worked their butts off to get in the regulated market. Mom and pops, there's plenty of room for everybody. But unfortunately, the people with the most money want to crush us. That's why they want to crush real caregivers. They want to crush the black market. They want to crush the mom and pops.
Right. Let me
that's just not right. We fought for this for 20, 30 years.
Hold on, Jerry. Let me just get Barton real quick. I got 30 seconds only. Shouldn't the feds legalize marijuana? Wouldn't that help a lot, Barton?
Of course it should. Of course, the federal government should legalize marijuana, or at least allow states to have their own policy about marijuana. Allow different states to engage in interstate commerce. And I also want to remind everybody that any adult over the age of 21 is allowed to grow marijuana, up to 12 plants in their own home. So that will also contribute to some type of competition, but it's not supposed to be competitive. Some people want to grow it in their own home. Some people want to buy it from dispensaries.
Hold that thought. We're not done. Final thoughts coming up after this. We'll be talking about Proposal P next week. But now, final thoughts, marijuana. Let's start with Attorney Barton Morris. Barton?
As I said earlier, at least I should have said, marijuana industry, the regulated licensed industry, is a $1.7 billion industry and growing. These large manufacturers have no business complaining about caregivers and people that are just growing marijuana, 12 plants of marijuana in their home. Also, municipalities are coming down on these caregivers that have been saints, that have been providing marijuana to medical marijuana patients since 2008. That is a law that is going to be sacred, that we're going to continue to fight for, and we're going to continue to fight these municipalities to continue to try to regulate them and zone them out of their homes.
Final thoughts, Jerry Millen.
Final thoughts, Charlie. Leave the caregivers alone. Corporate greed, corporate weed, they want to stop the caregivers. They want to stop the mom and pop sites, the greenhouse of Walled Lake. Everybody that's in the legal market, not everyone, but most people. My friend Tom Beller, RL Solutions in Kalkaska, used to be a caregiver. Great local grower now here. Calvin Johnson used to be a caregiver, I believe. He has a brand out now. Leave the caregivers alone. For those that want a caregiver and they truly need it for medicine, stay with your caregiver. But stay away from the black market. And I'm calling on Attorney General Dana Nessel to please start cracking down. You can go to Commerce Township right now, Charlie, on Winter Street. Drive down Winter Street in Commerce Township. There's probably 10 or 15 illegal giant grows. The black market needs to stop. It's not tested. It's not safe. It's not about money. It's about public safety. But what I have to reiterate is leave the caregivers alone. They're taking care of sick people. I've done it. They don't hurt our business. Corporate greed, the big players, they want to shut them down. Stay out of their stores.
All right. Well, certainly we're going to follow this as well. Caregivers and corporate weed. I know that Granny will follow Granny's case. She'll be in court soon enough. And listen, I thank you for your thoughts and your insights on this issue. That's it for this edition of Let It Rip.